So yeah, after we started, yeah, we started.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. It's really good to be here. I'm Peter Welch. Thank you.
Hey.
Why don't we, first of all, this is amazing. It's so beautiful out today. And I think we did this about 3 years ago, right? Who was here? Well, welcome back. I really appreciate it. Why don't we go around and everybody introduce themselves? But what we've been doing with, you know, the whole point of getting together the young professionals, and there's groups like you all around the state, is revitalization of our local communities. And it's you who are going to have the burden and the challenge of doing it. And you know, I came here around your age. I grew up in Springfield, Mass. And after I got out of law school, I had a chance to work on Wall Street. I had a chance to work on K Street. I ended up on Bridge Street in White River Junction. And it was a good decision. I don't know if anybody's been up to White River lately, but it's incredible what's happened up there. And it's a lot of young people who just started revitalizing the town in the area. But I know there's real challenges to doing it. But the point of getting together is, the future is going to depend on what you do here in Windham County, and the future in Rutland and the future in St. Johnsbury. It's the young professionals that are getting together and giving each other mutual support and understanding that as you try to accomplish something that is your goal, having other people along the way is really a part of that. And it's really essential if we're going to get more people in Vermont and young people. So we've got to create kind of a virtuous cycle. And obviously there are a lot of policies that Montpelier could be engaged in and Washington could be engaged in that would make it easier rather than harder. Now, I'm not here to brag much about what's going on in D.C., but we can talk about that. So I just want to first say thank you to everybody for coming. And second, thank you for all that you're doing. And then third, let the discussion begin. But let's start by going around and everybody introducing themselves.
Sarah Lane. I work at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. I coordinate the Young Professionals.
Yeah, and you were involved in this?
Yep. Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
My name is Alyssa Todd. I'm the Director and Forensic Interviewer at Windham County Safe Place Child Advocacy Center, so the Child Advocacy Center for the entire county.
So the forensic interview is where there is trouble and you're trying to find out what happened.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm Christopher Lukasik. I'm a victim advocate at the State Attorney's Office on Main Street. Basically, when Alyssa does the cases, sends them over to me. So,
thanks.
yeah.
My name is Sarah Wiggins, and I work at SIT Study Abroad. I'm an admissions counselor at the program of work.
That's cool.
So.
Thank you.
My name's Alex Beck, and I'm the Workforce and Education Program Manager with the VDCC.
I'm John Sakosha. I'm an architect that used to work at Stevens and Associates, but recently I did self-practice.
Great. You were involved with the Punch Club, or the Brooks House. Yeah. Great.
I'm Andrew Marchev. I'm an associate attorney at Phillips, Dunn, Shriver, and Carroll.
Hi, my name is Cory Williams. I work for Applied Dynamics. They're an industrial contractor. I'm the sales manager there.
I'm Jillian Hobdry. I'm Cory's fiance. And,
You're what?
Cory's fiance. And I am a creative director in Putney, Vermont. We work for basically a bunch of nonprofits all over us.
Hi, I'm Knaebie. I'm a workforce development case manager with the Department of Labor.
Chris Parker, Service Director for Windham Central Supervisory and Vernon Selectboard. Vernon is still part of Windham County. I think that gets forgotten quite often.
It's beautiful down there.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm Anna Bowler. I run a solar asset management.
Katherine Partington. I'm the resident choreographer in the New England Youth Theater across the street.
Mike Brewer worked for the post office.
Thanks, Michael.
I'm Caden Dole. I'm a resident dean at Landmark.
You're a landmark.
Hi, I'm Nicole Pasenka. I also work at Landmark College. I'm the Assistant Director of Housing Operations. I'm also a resident dean, and I'm part of the Vermont Women in Higher Education Board.
Hi, I'm Cora. Perch here. Hi.
Cora. Cora's in charge.
I just oversee this.
Cora and Andrew.
I'm Cora Skeel. I am the Sales and Marketing Manager at Mocha.
So you're at home.
Yeah, it's my turf.
Tom?
Tom Bodette. I'm an old guy. First room. I co-founded AdSpace, which is the woodshop school and gallery next door.
Pierre?
I'm Pierre, Mocha Joe's, founder of Mocha Joe's.
Thank you for hosting us.
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, everybody. I'm Joe Rivera. I'm also a member here next door at the woodworking AdSpace.
Well, thank you. So, you know, it's really a discussion to kind of get some focus on a lot of the issues that you think are important. And obviously, a lot of them are pretty basic about child care, about broadband, about the cost of housing. But I'd really look to let's just open up for discussion about what some of the challenges are. And it really is tough. The things that I've been hearing are transportation, the cost of housing, child care for folks who are at the stage of starting a family. Student debt is incredible. And I just want to say that when I came here, I got out of law school. It was literally in the Brattleboro that I first came, and I started looking around for jobs. But the circumstances for me were a good deal different than they are for your generation. I had $5,000 of student debt after college and law school, which obviously was pretty manageable. The first place I lived, I was single when I came up here. I lived in an attic apartment in White River Junction. I think my rent was like $125. I say that. And, my first job I made $9,000, but I could pay my bills on that. I really could. And what's happening now is, I'm going to hear from you, but just to reflect what I've been hearing, and it's really different. There's a lot of folks who are starting out with a debt that's equal to what my mortgage was. When my wife and I first bought our first house, it was like $46,000, right? That sounds pretty good. And and we didn't have debt, and the wages as they are then is now are not, they're not city wages. I was getting paid a lot less than if I worked in a city just like you guys. But it was in fact more affordable. So those are the challenges I'm hearing, and in fact, I think a lot of that reflects what's been happening in public policy over the last 30 to 40 years. I don't want, I'll just leave it there by way of introduction, but it's also by way of appreciation for the challenges that you face as you get started and get your toehold in building a community, building life. The thing that I really appreciated, though, about coming, and I look forward to hearing from you, is I felt I had a lot of responsibility right at the beginning of my career. If I had gone, I'm a lawyer, so if I had gone to a big law firm, I'd be working on, quote, big cases, but without much responsibility, researching footnotes. And when I was up here, I was a public defender, and I was trying homicide cases within a year and a half or 2 years. And I'm not sure that was great for my clients, but but in terms of taking responsibility for doing the work, it was good. It definitely felt good to me. So there's an aspect of choice that obviously we make when we come here, but there's public policy aspects of what the scene is that you come into that can make it harder or easier. And I really believe we've got to begin addressing those public policy issues that make it a much more difficult choice for people to make to come to Brattleboro or St. Johnsbury. So that's by way of introduction, but let's open up for some discussion.
One thing
Katherine, go
that
ahead.
comes to mind
Yeah.
is how if you're, so I used to work at Mondo Media Works, which
Right.
recently, had to lay off a few people.
Right.
And loved working there.
Yeah, had a
Luke's
great
great.
reputation.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
had a lot of fun.
You did work for
But-
Rutland, right?
I did work
Yeah.
for Rutland, which
Yeah.
was so exciting.
Yeah.
But I've talked to other people, when they lose a job or they're moving on from a job, there isn't a lot of choice.
Right.
There's not a lot of flexibility. And a lot of those people, maybe about half, I look at Sarah because we can talk about that. I don't know, Cora, you used to work there too. Do you think like about half people at Mondo moved?
Something like that.
Yeah. And so I think that's tricky, or they're starting their own businesses. And so there just seems to be a constraint of flexibility in terms of moving from job to job.
Right.
I'm not sure the solution about that, but I'll still, we can.
Well, I mean, the solution is a stronger economy. That helps. I mean, and there's there's a real challenge with how a lot of those jobs are getting concentrated in the cities, and throughout the country there's a real challenge for rural America. And we're in this great metropolitan hotspot of Brattleboro, but it's not quite as big as Boston. And the challenges that we face here in Vermont are very significant all around rural America. And interestingly enough, when a lot of my colleagues in D.C. are from rural districts, and they're primarily Republicans, and a lot of issues we don't see eye to eye, but on the challenges that face the places we represent, they're very, very similar.
I think it's interesting the way that we talk about like bringing working people and working families into Vermont, and the way that we talk about wanting to make our communities more vibrant. And we already have all of these assets that come with small towns, and particularly Vermont small towns. There is a really strong sense of community. If you've grown up here, it's pretty easy to build a network. I think it's a lot harder if you're trying to enter into that. I grew up here, so I have this.
In Brattleboro?
No, well, in Westminster West. I mean, Windham County. I lived in multiple towns around here, but I think the way that we talk about it, it's sort of this chicken and the egg problem, where we talk about the need to bring more people in, but then we also talk about the need to like change things to attract people, but then the idea is, well, wait, things are only going to start to shift if we're able to bring more people in. And I don't know what the solution to that is, but I think that, for me, a lot of the challenges about living here, and I've always wanted to move back here, and I've very frequently thought about moving away, which would be awful for me. I want to be here, but a lot of the challenges are these really sort of basic, not super exciting, not newsworthy things like childcare. We live 35 minutes, 40 minutes away from town, and we'd love to move closer, but like property taxes are a real barrier. And I understand what those taxes go towards, and maybe those taxes need to stay where they are, but there has to be a trade-off, because I can't the affordability issue, right? It's like I can't buy a home that accommodates my family of 4 and then pay the property taxes and then pay the daycare. But as it is, I'm also paying a ton in gas money, and I'm contributing significantly to greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, like, my family is probably like, I don't know, 1% of.
Now there's the problem.
I'm the problem. But it is this question, and I think something that I actually, strolling at the Huffers, I was talking to Christine Hellquist, and she was talking about like sort of holistic energy systems, and thinking about energy in this holistic way, like what's the sort of waterfall effect when you do one thing, blah, blah. And I've been thinking about that just sort of in like policy terms, and in like one person's life terms, and in community terms, and like what are the contingencies sort of, and like what do we need to focus on now? What can we focus on at the same time? And what are the actual steps we take to start sort of invigorating the state and specifically the southern half. I mean, we talk about cities, but Burlington is a city, and compared to this area,
Burlington is its own world.
Burlington's a microcosm.
It's just not the same.
Right.
And good for them, you know, that they've got a kind of a tipping point there.
Right.
But and they've got their own challenges, but they're distinct from what I see in White River, what I see here, or St. Johnsbury, Newport. It's really, really different. Go ahead.
Right, well, yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I guess that's just sort of my point is like, I think, you know, I'm not sure how to think about this, but it feels like we're not thinking about it in the right way. Like, I think that, I don't know, I just think that there's sort of a process that would fit with like the lives of millennials and what they're looking for. And also, you know, Gen Xers and older working people, older than our generation, where there are certain things that sort of have to happen first or have to happen at the same time that are going to ease the burden for us and also would make sense policy-wise. And I don't know what those things are, but like, I think that drawing people here in the current climate, people are gonna have this challenge, right? Like Mondo's a great example, is people were like, hey, I can't, this job was keeping me here, and finding another one here is, I can't find what I need. Right. So if that is constantly happening, then we're just gonna see a ton of turnover. Right. So like what needs to happen first, or at the same time, or how do those things sort of interact?
I could speak to that because I'm in an industry that wants to grow really fast, and I would love to hire lots of people, but the margin for profit in solar is really small. Yeah. So I'm having to wait for the PUC, say, to allow more incentives for solar. And if there was a higher rate of margin, then we'd be able to hire more people, and there'd be more installers, even for small systems. Not necessarily the commercial ones that I manage. But it's, I mean, you know, we have tariffs now that are taking some of the profit margin away. And the utility is tightening some other margins. So it's like, what you skim off the top is only bare minimum.
Right.
But I see a lot of opportunity for growth. It's just, you know, some doors need to open there.
Somewhat?
Some doors need to open.
Right.
In my experience, you know, this, especially this last legislative session in Vermont, income was such a big topic of conversation. Raising minimum wage was a very, you know, it was a plank of what was happening. But no one talks about costs, especially for middle income folks like ourselves. Right. So, you know, the median household income for our area, you know, when we first moved to Brattleboro, we are eligible for housing. When we get that first raise, we're not.
Right.
And
so that cliff is
abrupt. Yeah, and you know, property taxes, the costs, you know, to invest in housing don't pay off. So, you know, you buy an old Victorian because that's all we have, because it's impossible to build multifamily units because of zoning and other, you know, regulations.
So, I want to go back to zoning. Continue, but I want to go back to zoning because that does seem to be an issue.
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard to build new in a lot of places, and if you know,
it's incredibly expensive. Too.
Yeah, it's too expensive. So you know, the low-income housing organizations are doing excellent work, but they're the only folks who can afford to build because they're so heavily subsidized. And you know, when any of us might want to buy an old home in town and fix it up, every dollar we add to the value of that home. And these homes need a lot of work. It's not like there aren't any turnkey homes.
And they're still expensive. Like $200,000 is still expensive for this areas, and yet you're looking at purchasing $200,000 and then investing like $150,000.
Right.
And then you're.
And then the town says, thanks so much for moving here. Thank you for fixing our neighborhoods. Here is a tax bill that is twice as high for things that services we don't actually pay for, like. Or that we don't use or need necessarily, you know. And when I have kids, I'll feel a lot better about all of my property taxes going to schools if you want to put them in the public school system. So, so that's, there's something has got to give there, property tax rebates, you're stealing from the kids. Anytime you talk about any sort of tax abatement or, anything that messes with the education fund or messes with the education fund, you're not in the right position because you're taking money away from kids. They're free kids, but yeah. So, I don't know. So I think housing and it's that two-way street of regulation makes it very expensive to build new, and yeah, if we're all succeed in recruiting.
That everywhere, housing really does seem to be a crisis. And I don't know why it's so much worse now than it was when I came. I mean, I lived in an attic, but it was clean. I could walk to work. It was when I was getting started. But also when we bought our first house, it was definitely a fixer-upper. But it was $46,000, and fixer-upper was like $10,000. You know what I mean?
I think it goes back to banks. When people default on their loans, the banks don't want to lower the value of the houses that they've gained.
Well, no, I think it's the real estate market, though, initially, and the default, the banks, if they loan the money out, they're going to want to get it back if they can, but it's really the market.
It's a tight system.
And what I was wondering is how much zoning contributes to that or holds us back from being able to try to build affordable options, especially for people getting started, whether it's, a freestanding house, no matter what, is going to be expensive. Some apartments and stuff, potentially, the cost of construction is less.
I think there's something else that happens in Vermont.
Yeah.
And I have this impulse as a Vermonter, who's lived here my whole life, which is that there's a really strong resistance to development also. And I think that comes from a really good and valuable place. But I think that, so there's a policy piece and an affordability piece, absolutely. And at Mocha Joe's, actually part of my benefit package is that I get $5,000 towards a down payment on my house. So
where do I sign up?
For me, we have a program with Brattleboro Savings and Loan because we have a really great relationship with this local bank. And so for me, when I was looking at jobs, that was yep. Obviously there are other reasons why I'm here, but that's just sort of a sidebar that if a business is supported the way that they need to be supported, a small business like this, and can give those kinds of benefits, that's huge, and that's a big help. But also, there's this real resistance to development. I think I was reading about something in Putney where they're going to be building apartment units across the street from the co-op in this big field that's always been a big field. And my immediate reaction was no! I had this total emotional reaction to it. And then I started thinking about it, and somebody shared a photo of their the front of their apartment in the apartment complex that was put in sort of across the street from the kind of fire house.
Yeah.
Anyways, and it was this beautiful little entrance with a pot of flowers and this lovely yard for this single mom of two who just moved to the area and was sort of building her life back up. Wow. And I'm not sure what the income thresholds are for that housing. I have no idea. I don't have information on it. But I had to check myself to be
right.
Wait a minute. And I want to develop parts. My dream would be to have, I don't know, some sort of a small development, which is sort of a scary and bad word, of sustainable, affordable homes where you have a neighborhood. Maybe it's elderly housing and, single family homes or something like that, where we're actually really investing in the community, and we're not we're not clear cutting all the mountains. It's got to be done responsibly, but
right.
There's a need. I can't find a house in Putney. I cannot find something that can accommodate my family that I can afford. And so I think that we are also facing this challenge of just stubborn New Englanders too. And I think that conversation has to be really delicate because I get defensive before I check myself. So I don't know, it's just another observation.
No, that's true.
There's a need not only for property, like for home buying, but also the rental market is just totally out of control. I think there's not enough property. I mean, I don't know if anybody else here is in the Brattleboro Facebook group, but it's like at least 4 times a week, somebody is posting in that group saying, is there anywhere else I can look besides Craigslist? I need a place to live. Like, this is what I'm looking for. Because there's not enough. There's not enough
Or the ones that
rentals.
are out of sight rental.
Yeah, there's not enough rental property, and it's extremely expensive. There's just, I mean.
Heating on top of that.
Yeah, and a lot of these are in these old Victorian homes that have been converted that are not necessarily, haven't been winterized very well, and so then, you know, you're paying $1,200 a month for a 1-bedroom, and then you're also going through hundreds of gallons of fuel oil to keep it above 65 in your house. And so it's crazy. When I moved here, I couldn't find a place at first. I couldn't find anywhere, and I found somebody through posting on Craigslist saying, somebody please house me. I have a job that I have to start, and I have nowhere to go. And I think that a lot of folks have had to resort to that kind of thing. That's how I did it. With like some woman on Craigslist, like thankfully, no, I didn't get murdered. But like somebody found me on Craigslist, and I posted and said, I'm a professional, I'm moving to the area, and I need to find a place to live. And there are no apartments that I can afford. And I ended up in Dummerston for a while, in a place that she, you know, housed me for a little while. But I mean, so that's really, I think, not an uncommon experience for folks who are trying to move to the area. And if you're moving to the area and you're facing some of the issues that we've already talked about around, you know, if I take this job and then I decide that I'm not going to stay in this job, and I might not want to buy a house, because what if I do have to move to Boston or to another part of Vermont for another employment opportunity? You don't want to buy a house. You need to rent, or you want to rent.
I think I've learned that you have to know someone to get good housing. And actually, I benefit from that. I just moved to a really nice place on Western Ave, and it's because I knew the landlord personally. And I just moved to Vermont in September.
Where did you come from?
Amherst, Massachusetts. I was living there for 6 years. You know no one when you move to Vermont, so you rely on Craigslist, which means you get a 1-bedroom apartment with no living room for $800 a month. And you kind of hope that everything will just work out every month. And then after, it took me 9 months to actually get my feet into the community.
Pioneers.
Yeah.
Frontiers people.
Right, and like my landlord now is like, housing prices are insane. Come live in my 2-bedroom apartment for very, very cheap. I hate how it is here, and I'm hoping that me doing this will change everybody else, but it doesn't. Nice lady, but it does not change it.
Before I moved here, we're from Georgia. Cory was offered a job in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and we decided to visit, and then, you know, we took the job, and we were actually planning on settling in Augusta, buying a home, had saved up money, and we decided, well, why the hell not? Like, let's go move, and if we're not happy, we'll move again. And we came up here. We actually had to find an apartment through Airbnb. They were going to be leaving the country for several months, and we negotiated with them and said, we'll stay in your house for 6 months. And then we sold all of our stuff. We moved up here, stayed in here for 6 months, and then had to negotiate. We couldn't find another place to live. We're like, in that amount of time, we'll find a place to live, right? Couldn't find a home to buy. Couldn't find another place to rent. Had to negotiate again through another person to live in Revitalization, Vermont, which was an hour and a half from both of our jobs. So that's what we did for another 6 months until we could find a home to live in. And then not only that, but you're completely right, you have to know someone to buy a house, because we had to ditch 2 different realtors because they didn't care about our interests, and then finally find someone who like really knew about Newfane. That person had been living there for a long time, created a good relationship with them, and then happened to know other people within the community who were like, this is a great house, we love it here, you know, like really start to build relationships, and then found a home that we loved. And then after that, we both took jobs. Thank goodness we have jobs, like very pleased to have a job that we love, but at the same time, to have other opportunities, people are always looking for other opportunities, but I have to know someone, and we're just now getting our footing after being here for almost 3 years. And
Wow.
I'm just now, if I didn't know Sarah, I wouldn't be here today. If I didn't know Sarah, I wouldn't have, met other folks and, creating other relationships. And if I were to look for a job today, it would be in the same fields as the people who left Mono Media, and it's extremely difficult. There's nothing out there, and I get to a place where I'm depressed living here in Vermont, which is a beautiful, lovely place with all of these wonderful things to do. But the fact that I have to be depressed about sometimes working, about having to live in my beautiful home where I'm like, oh, if I lose my job, I'm not going to be able to afford it anymore. Things like that is literally how we're living. And I made a wonderful, beautiful decision to live here, but it's not things aren't working out the way that we thought it would, because it's not as welcoming as I thought it would be.
But what's really interesting is the house we bought is on a private road with 3 other houses. And those 3 other houses are second, third, and fourth homes of our neighbors, which they're great neighbors. We enjoy them very much. But what's really interesting in the last 6 months is our town has gone a long way to turning those homes into lodges. So those second, third, and fourth homeowners can rent their homes out through Airbnb on either a seasonal basis or a yearly basis. So we're struggling, trying to find good jobs, trying to keep our house, and our neighbors they've got it pretty good, and they're renting out their house on Airbnb while we're struggling.
And zoning wise, if whatever we're going to call it, they'll be called lodges.
It's taken a lot of property off the normal market. Yeah, I mean, it's a Burlington issue too. But I think it's all over.
I was in Airbnb for 3 years until I made a decision to switch it over to temporary housing for nurses. There's a big shortage for traveling nurses around here. And I found that actually I made more money through traveling nurses.
This is you renting?
This is me renting a place that I have on my property. There's a little apartment. And Airbnb was great, but you don't really, for me, I found out in this area, you make more through long-term rentals, and it's more stable, and that just seemed to fit my lifestyle. But all of that is about, paying your mortgage. And I think it speaks to the spirit of Vermont, where a lot of people don't have one job. I mean, if most of the people at this table have one job, that's really rare. A lot of the people I know are hustling and have all these side things. And Airbnb enabled me to stay here, and enables so many people to pay their mortgage, and they want to do Airbnb. They want to start their side business where they knit and have an Etsy account and do all of that remote type of work.
Right.
And one thing that I'll mention that I think is really interesting that I've started to learn more about, particularly in Southern Vermont, I'm meeting a lot of people that have jobs in Boston and travel back and forth. They live here and they actually drive, they will do that in a day trip.
A day trip to Boston?
There are a lot of people, teachers or working remote, and there's something really
Wait,
that
did you say some people are commuting to Boston from
Yeah. Yeah.
4 hours every day.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
2 hours flat.
I'm one of those people, but I go all the way to New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not every day.
Wait.
Sometimes in a day, I'll do it.
So you work in New York City?
Yeah.
So explain how you manage that.
Well, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
So I have multiple jobs, and I'm finding that I've only been here since October of last year. I also find that people have 10, 20 jobs at any given time. I'm also finding that it's very difficult to maintain, and it's kind of grinds you down after a while. But it has to be done to be able to survive here in Southern Vermont.
So would you be able, if we had better internet, I know what your internet situation is, but does your job allow you to do your New York job?
No, I work in the wine and spirits industry. So it's about density of population for me. I need to go where the people are.
So that's an interesting decision, but it's quality of life. There's something about Vermont, where you are, that you decided it's worth making that effort if you can sustain it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so describe that.
I mean, it's beautiful here. My wife and I purchased a piece of property in Newfane 3 years ago. So we're anchored here in that way. And there really is no escaping that.
Did you buy a house or build a house?
Well, we bought a house. We tore that house down because it was in terrible condition. And now we're building a house, yeah. But we live here in Brattleboro. So we're kind of managing that.
You got a lot going on.
I do, yeah.
I also split my time and go to New York City too. I'm taking classes down there right now, but I'm also an actor. So I similarly am anchored to a house of my husband that we also, well, a fire ripped it down and then we rebuilt it in 2014. But, and you know, speaking of zoning, we're going through an Act 250 permitting process because we also have a barn, which is a whole conversation that I won't go down the rabbit hole, but I think that there's a lot of misinformation about zoning in general.
Yeah.
Because living in Guilford and Vernon, we're like buddies as towns. We don't have zoning, and everyone thinks that, oh, this means you have a right to do whatever you want on your property. But in fact, it means that the state zoning, the Act 250 process, is triggered. And in our area, and other people in Vernon who are here can speak to this, there's a lot of businesses that were probably started years ago illegally, you know, according to the zoning, but they've been going and going and they pop up all the time. And then the state will swoop down, and it feels like swooping down because most of those conversations appear to happen in the northern part of the state. They'll swoop down and they'll say, hey, why did you do this? You know, we're gonna fine you, you know, like $10,000 because this is illegal. And
they're not coming down to solve our housing problems. No. They're coming down to enforce their Act 250 issues, which is...
And there's just a funky little conversation happening about that.
It's really interesting. I served in the state senate for quite a while, which is where the Montpelier is where the jurisdiction is for this. And there was always a wrestling match. You know, we're pretty environmentally oriented here in Vermont, so the Act 250 has got its place that most people acknowledge. But on the other hand, if it's overdone, it can really just create an impossible barrier if it's a mom and pop type of deal.
Exactly. It's not a one size. It's set up like a one size fits all built for ski resorts. But when you're just like a couple, you know, fixing up their barn, and it applies to that process, it becomes like this massively epic, like we are running alongside a large corporation.
The NIMBYs use it. You know, it's that one old curmudgeon in town.
Or sometimes not even in town. It's that person who owns a second or third house. You know, and that's actually what bothers me at times because you know the practical challenges. You know what we love about Vermont, I think a lot of us is a sense of community and independence and self-reliance. And how do you create community? Well, there's got to be a nucleus of people who are, you know, committed to where they are. So, you know, what you described on your road, or the second and third, fourth houses, you know, it's an issue. It really is.
The income tax from those houses must be worth it for the state to keep allowing that system.
I don't know that, you know, I don't think anywhere there's a different system on that. I mean, what's happening, you know, this is something that's happening to some extent with income inequality, I think, because it's not a Vermont, that issue of some people rich people owning second, third, fourth houses. I mean, that's a fair amount of discretionary income, right? And you know, you're seeing it in some of the super high rent districts like Manhattan, right, or London. You're getting people that buy these multi-million-dollar apartments and never use them. It's just a way to park cash. I mean, obviously that's not what's happening here at that scale, but it's happening at a Vermont scale. So I don't know how much that contributes, but to the housing issue. But there's got to be. It's very, very clear that we need new construction to get us started. You know, and I think a lot of us, when you come to Vermont, you have have this, you hope you can get your own house with a little piece of land, you can have a garden, you can, you know, leave.
From our housing program Cora mentioned, just as far as actual, solutions, we've had, since we started, 3 people buy houses, and $5,000 is not like that much in terms of offering a deposit, but it's more the relationship that we have with Brattleboro Savings and Loan, where they're offering $11,000 grant as well, so that adds it up to 16, and it's mostly, kids, I'm saying kids, but people in their 20s don't necessarily think of themselves as homeowners, but in this town, it's so expensive to rent. It's significantly cheaper to own a house than it is to, rent. So we really are lowering people's costs. But you can really, really, really lower people's cost of living if you can get them to buy a house, which is why we started that.
Here, that's, I mean, that sounds fantastic. There's 2 things. One is an employer giving that incentive, because that's a lot of money when you're starting out, okay? It's not compared to the cost of the house, but part of it is it's real money that helps bring down the cost, and it's an incentive, and it gives you that idea. Maybe you ought to look at that. And then to have a local bank, I mean, this is one of the big casualties of the financial crisis that put the squeeze on a lot of our local banks, and the irony is that the local banks are the ones that kept us afloat. They're not the ones that caused the crisis. That was Wall Street. And Brattleboro Savings and Loan, I think, does a really, really good job, and it's an example of a local bank that, at the end of the day, they feel good when they make a loan so you can get your first house, or they can help you expand your business. That's as opposed to, getting you to buy some collateralized debt obligations they're going to blow up. So that's interesting.
I think that
it's working.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that that is super amazing, and I think that a lot of, even the bigger small banks in the area, there's just a lot of support, I think, and that's, again, maybe something that you need to know the people and have been going to the same bank since you were 6 to have that relationship. I don't know, because this is a singular experience, but that's also putting the onus on them, on the banks, and I'm curious, from your perspective, it seems like this is sort of the wedge here is housing, because it's on literally all of our minds. And what do you see as a potential and viable solution, even if it's just a first step towards a larger solution?
I think
there's federal or state.
There's issues at the state level, and there's issues at the local level, and at the federal level, okay? What are things that locally can be done? And that takes local imagination. The $5,000 a year program for a house that Mocha Joe's has is incredible. I think local banks are incredibly important. Those are the institutional mechanisms that you need in order to make this happen, all right? And it's one of the reasons why we really have to facilitate stronger local financial institutions, I believe. We don't have to worry about Wall Street, they're doing fine. Thank you. And then I think the state level, this question of how do we facilitate affordable housing construction, that's got to be part of it.
Yeah.
And it can't, and it used to be, and this is true when I was at your stage, there was a lot of emphasis public policy-wise on housing for low-income people. The problem is everybody needs housing now. It's a challenge. That is an ever-expanding category. It's low income in relationship to high costs, all right? So you can have a, quote, decent job, but if the costs are escalating way beyond what your pay is increasing, then you're in the same situation. So, I've been, and this is the problem. This conversation we're having, they could be having it just about any rural or metropolitan area.
Yeah.
And zoning is now something that people are talking about around the country as essential to try to make more affordable housing available and more locally based housing closer to your job. And then, at the federal level, what's really distressing to me is that the priorities down there are skewed. And it's a real problem. And I'll just give the most explicit example. last year, Bernie, Patrick, and I were all vehemently opposed to this, but Congress passed a 2.3 tax cut that adds 2.3 trillion to the deficit, and 87% of the benefit went to multinational corporations in the top 1%. That's your money that's going there instead of into some housing programs or some first-time buyer programs or some, let's say, interest rate relief on student debt. This is another example. The government borrows money at like 2%, and I don't know how many of you have student loans, but probably a lot of you. It's like 7 or 8%. And parents, if you get those Parent Plus loans, when your parents, and it's amazing to me, a lot of parents take out second mortgages. They thought they were going to retire. I'm serious. A couple of folks who had machine tool jobs, they were so looking forward to taking that first time, like 3-week vacation. And they had to come up with they wanted to help their son or their daughter, or in some cases their grandson or their granddaughter, and they took out a second mortgage. So all that saving. So that's about priorities, and you're right to be upset about that, because I am, and that's kind of the upside down situation that we have, where at the federal level there's just got to be some focus on meeting the needs of working families, put it that way. So that's on us. I think the communities can deal with some things like zoning. If they have good local businesses like Mocha Joe's partnering with the bank, that obviously can be a boost. And some of these things with the state. The state's there's a lot of activity on affordable housing that's been, I think, tremendous and locally led by a lot of our housing programs. And one of the ironies too is we want to preserve land, but we married land preservation and affordable housing in the Vermont Housing and Conservation Trust Fund. That was something we did back in '87 when I was in this town. But that affordable housing is really key.
We struggle with pay as well. I mean, our low pay, and working for the food service company, we just got rid of the Abbey Group, which was paying their staff $11 an hour at 32 hours a week. I mean, you're talking $1,200, $1,300 a month, and these are single moms that are taking these jobs. So we got rid of them. We hired all of their staff at $15 an hour, and to see the difference that has made in their lives, just the enthusiasm that they have now. But they still can't afford anything. And I support the $15 an hour minimum wage, but that also affects the mom and pop shops, which have made Vermont so successful.
That's true.
So the only people that, corporations can afford that, but we can't expect these small businesses to be able to pay all of their staff that rate.
It's a chicken and egg thing. I mean, I wish it were as easy as us passing a law in Montpelier or in Washington that there'll be a livable wage, but you've got to have businesses that can pay the bills and sustain it. So it's about growing the economy. I mean, what's happened at the top level with the corporations, and this is not with their small businesses around Vermont. I'm being told we've got to go. but these are the structural imbalances that are weighing down your efforts and the efforts of people like you all around the country. Amazon doesn't pay any taxes. And it's incredibly successful. And what's happened, and this is so different, this has happened in my lifetime. It used to be as productivity went up and corporate profits went up, the share that went to workers went up. They were more or less in balance. And what's happened is the productivity has gone up, profit has gone up, and the payout to shareholders has gone way up, and the payout to workers has gone way down. I mean, the share of the pie that goes to workers is at the lowest point since the Great Depression. And that's what's really creating a lot of frustration for people, because you're working really hard, but if something happens, you don't get a tenant if you're getting a little extra income, or problem with the car. And once you start having kids, you are no longer in control of your budget, let me tell you. You know, I was always, I was always like so determined to be able to pay my bills by the end of the month. Once we had kids, it was an accident, needed glasses, braces, you know, something. And so it's hard. But I think there's things that can be done locally, at the state, and at the federal level.
To support small businesses.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things
Yeah.
right now is like, we have to decide right now, we can't even have kids. We can't
Right.
afford to have children. Like,
Right.
we're at the time in our lives where we want to have kids, but
Right.
like I said, if we lose our jobs, can't afford our house, can't have a child, because that is where we are right now, the gap in our the income where we have like that at the end of the day, at the end of the month, like just enough to like pass over to the next month, just have a savings account to do that.
Right.
We can't afford to have a child right now. And like I know everyone says wait, you don't have to be able to afford to have a child, just have a child, but that's not the smart thing to do in this economy right now.
I mean, I work an extra 2 bartending shifts a week to barely be able to pay for childcare right now. But I will say something really positive is that this year, multiple towns have started offering public pre-K.
Yeah.
And in the fall, my 4.5-year-old is going to be in public pre-K at a really, really great school. His
But
teacher
see,
is amazing, and I'm
that's-
so grateful. It's going to change our lives.
That's fantastic, it will, and that's the point. That's what government's about. You got to have a plan to provide the basic tools that we all need, like in education, like childcare, and like affordable health care. And you know, that's the struggle in Washington about priorities that we're having. But it really gets transmitted down to you. I mean, that story about you now having some security about pre-K for your 4.5-year-old.
Yeah, 'cause then I'll be able to take care of the back pay for the other daycare. From when I was laid off.
You know, every parent needs that. You know? Well, I guess our time is up, and you delivering the mail?
I work inside.
I work inside, but you're getting it delivered.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you. We don't have an answer here, but you know, what we have is an identification of things that we need. We need to talk about. I'm sorry.
Stranded Act, 18 million for local communities.
A what?
A Stranded Act. It's up at the house right now.
It is in Montpelier.
No, federal.
The Stranded Act.
Yep, brings back money for nuclear communities for economic development.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a big. So we lost a lot of good jobs. Yeah.
We lost a good town.
I'm sorry, what?
We lost a good town.
It is a good town.
But we've lost it. Vernon is at a crucial crossroads. We either decide that we let that become a retirement community, or we get some money and we can turn it back into the thriving community that myself and Michael grew up in, which is no longer there. And since Vermont Yankee closed, we feel that Vernon is kind of the forgotten stepchild.
Well,
we are not part of Vermont the way
major
that we feel.
employer that is providing really good jobs and really good incomes to people, and obviously in the community. And you know, we lost a lot of machine tool companies in Springfield, Vermont, which were thriving when I first came to Vermont, and now almost don't exist. So that's a real challenge. You know. Well, there's not a conclusion here, obviously, but I really, really appreciate everybody coming. But I'll tell you, I have more of a sense of urgency. I'm just trying to fight for really different priorities in D.C. It's very, very bad what's happening there right now. I mean, there's some significant changes that, you know, the composition of the House. Politics is kind of broken, but there's also the tax cut is really the most obscene disregard for the priorities that what I would say working families need across the country. And you know, you're all talking about. I mean, you're not complaining. You're just talking about what are the practical day-to-day challenges you face, our government should be helpful with policies that make the the challenges you face more manageable, not less manageable. So I'll continue to do what I can there, but I really appreciate you doing all you can here. It's really very nice to meet everybody. It's nice to be here in Mocha Joe. I mean, this is an inspiring example. What is this doing here, right? It's unbelievable. And all the jobs, and the ones in Cameroon, and how it's in Brattleboro, Vermont, and it's really good business, creating a lot of good jobs, and there'll be people here that maybe are able to accomplish the same thing, but it really makes a difference. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We want to do a group photo of that.
That'd be great. Yeah.
I thought something was Chris is a 950.
I know. Yeah. Get in here, Alex.
This is great. Look at